The New Tech Times, a video magazine for the electronic age. In this edition, sports cable. Will big money for teams mean big headaches for fans? Also, video graphics. The film industry puts computers to work. Later, a commentary by columnist Lindsay Van Gelder and a guide to video cassette recorders. We'll show you what to look for. All in this edition of the New Tech Times.
The New Tech Times is brought to you through a grant from Wausau Insurance Companies. Times change. Wausau works.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Johnson. A great many Americans look upon computers and the new technology as the enemy. It's something scientific and cold and inhuman. But the fact is that computers and electronics technology are now merging with art, and neither will ever be quite the same again. The revolution is taking place in recording studios and artist lofts and on TV programs. Whatever you may think of television, programming in the past has usually been little more than motion pictures of radio programs. Oh, there have been a few exceptions, I suppose. ABC Sports did some innovative things. There have been a few video artists. But mostly television has remained undeveloped as an art form. Now all that's changing. You know that opening animation that we use on this program? Did you ever wonder how it was put together? Well, so did I, and we're both about to find out. And remember that with the continuing drop in prices, what industry is using today will soon be available to the rest of us. Here's our report, produced by Barry Stoner.
These are illustrations by Paul Zander. They could have been created by paint and brush on canvas, but they were not. They are electronically generated images. They were produced at the New York Institute of Technology with a digital pen, an electronic tablet, and a computerized palette. Here's how it's done.
Some of the basics of the machine is the fact that the pen has an antenna and a microswitch. And the electronic tablet is filled with wires, horizontal and vertical. The pen, when you get the antenna close to the tablet, you get a cursor on the upper screen. So that shows you where you're at. And that terminal holds the menu, so you think of the terms as buttons, because every time I press down on the pen, something happens. And the lower monitor carries the picture. Now, to select colors, all I have to do is take the cursor, touch the color I want to use, and the palette disappears so I can work under here if I want to. But now the color's in the pen, and you simply draw with it just like any other pen. And when I want the palette to come back, I move the cursor off the bottom of the screen and then pick another color. Also, I have a fill button. Now, this allows you to pick up colors from the screen and fill areas solid or enclosed. Now, of course, this is much faster than paint. And say I want to look at some more color schemes, all I have to do now is to go in and ask the computer for some ideas. And so automatically, I'm going to come up with 255 more color schemes.
Zander and others are using new technology to create visual art. A traditional animation process could have been used to create the opening sequence for the New Tech Times, but it was not. This animation was produced with the help of a computer. One drawing is recorded at the beginning of the action. Then at the end of the action, another drawing is entered. The computer fills in all the drawings in between the beginning and the end of the action. The artist can even control the speed of the action at the touch of a button. Another time-consuming process in traditional animation is the painting of each cell. With a computer, it's as simple as touching the electronic pen to the tablet. The look of traditional animation can be preserved, even though, as in this case, it's generated electronically. In the future, the illusion of three-dimensional animated worlds may be commonplace, as computers bring new possibilities to the electronic artist. But when it comes to creating strange new worlds through visual illusion, few can compete with the success of John Dykstra and his team of visual magicians at Apogee Studios in Los Angeles. They created the special effects for the first Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, the first Superman movie, and many other films and commercials.
We use all manner of high technology, and it's really fun. I mean, for most people to come into contact with as much technology as we come into contact with on a daily basis, they would have to run 20 different companies. So this is excitement, and it's got a little magic in it, and it's got little movies in it, and I love recording images, and most of these people love recording images, so I don't know, it's kind of a super garage with a way to maintain itself.
To create these illusions, a computer is used to control the movement of the camera so precisely that multiple images can be combined to create satellites rushing through space or a computer's eye view of its operator. Although Dykstra's special effects have been spectacular, he puts them in perspective.
Effects always are an element of storytelling. That's all they are. So, I mean, the magic, the illusion isn't there to stand alone. It isn't to impress people with what magic tricks you can do. It's to tell a story.
And when it comes to the role of new computer technology in the creative process, John Dykstra may speak for many visual artists.
You can give somebody the most sophisticated device in the world, the capabilities of which are enormous. A computer is a perfect example of that. And some people will make, you know, great things out of it, and other people will try to duplicate things they've seen done in other mediums, and other people will take that device and make, you know, they'll make doilies that are terrible doilies. I mean, a good doily would be good, but a terrible doily is, you know. So I think it's a tool. It's like anything else.
In these new tech times, the artist, the animator, and the movie maker will find the computer a useful tool, but it will never replace the magic of the creative process.
Not only is the new technology affecting what others are producing for us, it's also affecting what you and I can do with that entertainment in our homes. For years, expensive TV sets came with little 98-cent speakers. Soon we'll actually be able to hear our TV shows, and in stereo. Large TV screens and better sound will make those offensive commercials even bigger and louder in our living rooms. And now they're video recorders. Now, if you think most conventional television is mindless pap with commercial interruptions, you might well wonder why anyone would want to preserve it. But if you enjoy TV, and its schedule doesn't always agree with yours, cassette recorder may be just what you need. Here's Ken Munt's report.
Learning the ABCs of buying a VCR requires a little homework, and there are a number of consumer-oriented articles worth reviewing before you leave your living room. Consumer Reports July '83 issue and the Home Entertainment Quarterly of September-October are two. Here are some other tips. Number 1, learn the difference between VHS and Beta, the two formats for home recorders. VHS is more popular, so there are more pre-recorded cassettes, movies, concerts, and so forth on the VHS format. That's important because you can't play a VHS cassette on a Beta machine and vice versa. Beta tapes do have one advantage, however. They produce slightly better picture quality. Number 2, know what you want before you go shopping. As electronics writer Jane Wallman explained, salespeople have been known to convince a customer to step up or buy more than they really need.
You might also be aware that some retailers at certain times get bonuses for selling certain brands, so that you might come in and ask for a certain brand and he might try and switch you to another one for his own gain. And he may try to make it appear that this model is best for you when in fact it's really best for him.
Next, decide on the features you want, the options that will personalize your VCR. Items like remote control, programming time, on-screen search, or cable readiness. Here's some information on each. Tip number 3, remote control. That's the device that allows you to sit back, put your feet up, and let your fingers do the fast forwarding. If that's important to you, expect to pay a little for it. Tip number 4, programming time. The simple basic VCRs allow you to pre-program the machine to record one show in a 24-hour period. If you travel frequently and don't want to miss some of your favorite shows, the more expensive models let you record as many as 8 shows during a 2-week period. Again, you'll pay more for this. Tip number 5, on-screen search. This handy option now comes on most models. You won't have to go to the highest price decks to get it, and it's useful. With it, you can fast forward through something you don't want to watch while still seeing the picture on the screen. That way, you know exactly where to pick up your viewing again. Tip number 6, cable readiness. Some videocassette recorders now come complete with the ability to tape and tune unscrambled cable transmissions without a separate converter box. Tip number 7, don't forget convenience. Make sure the buttons are big enough for you to punch and that the machine will fit in the shelf space you've allotted. A front-loading model saves more space than the pop-up top variety. And finally, tip number 8, price. Videocassette recorders start at about $400, and of course, the more you pay, the more features you get. Just remember to get only the features you want and need, and shop around.
You can get some really good deals on last year's models. The only thing you might be sacrificing is some of the newer features that are available on this year's models.
And our last piece of advice, tip number 9. For more information, head to your local library.
I recently bought a videocassette recorder. Do take Ken's advice. Prices and features can vary enormously, and time spent in your local library can pay you big dividends. But once you get one of these things home, what is there to record? Because no one has yet invented a piece of technology that can actually improve the content of television. Clearly, one of the most popular forms of programming is sports. Sports seem made for television, and in more ways than one. They've even changed the rules to create timeouts for commercials. Sometimes there seems to be more interest in the bottom line than the goal line. And it may end up costing you a lot more than you feel like paying. Gary Probst has this report on cable sports networks.
He didn't, and Schmidt still hits it out. 6-2 ball game. Mike's second home run of the night. 32nd of the year. He got an off-speed pitch, and he jumped on it. 6-2 ball game. Padres lead.
Mike Schmidt is one of the highly paid superstars playing for the National League champions, the Philadelphia Phillies. Philadelphia is becoming a successful sports city. The 76ers basketball team holds the NBA title. Opponents claim the Sixers bought the championship by shelling out a reported $2 million a year for center Moses Malone. There's a lot of money in Philly for sports figures. Much of that money comes from fans who pay for a cable sports service called Prism.
Prism Sports presents Showdown 83, the NBA Eastern Conference Championship. Tonight, Game 5, the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Milwaukee Bucks.
Prism has over 350,000 subscribers. It's the largest regional sports channel in the nation. That's in spite of the fact that the city of Philadelphia has yet to be wired for cable. Prism generates about $4 million a month in gross revenue just from the suburbs. People pay between $10 and $12 a month. Prism is a joint venture of the owners, the Phillies, the 76ers, and the Flyers hockey team. The man in charge of Prism is Jack Williams. He says the cable money helps the teams and the fans.
The teams must look for every source of revenue that is available to them. In effect, if a pay television operation can pay a baseball or a basketball or a hockey team the kind of revenues that will allow them to attract winning players, maybe the fan has been given a gift there because now they can follow a winner rather than one that, you know, maybe has not been doing that well.
Prism's success is prompting other team owners across the nation to set up their own sports channels. At least 22 of the 26 clubs in Major League Baseball will have some kind of cable contract by next season. It means more games for the fans who are willing to pay. It also means that fewer games will be on free TV. The same thing is happening for basketball. In Philadelphia, Channel 17 carries away games for the 76ers. But the manager of the station says Prism could easily outbid him for the broadcast rights. if the owners decided to cut his station out of the action.
It's conceivable that there will come a time when pay cable will be the only place where you'll be able to see a major event like a World Championship, like a Super Bowl in football, like the NBA Championship basketball or the Stanley Cup in hockey, because of the potential in the amount of money that they could pay for those rights. That's a distinct possibility.
Shubin claims that sports will change drastically if all professional games are put on cable. He can envision disgusted fans staying away from events and refusing to buy the service. A spokesman for the 76ers says it's possible that someday professional teams may be playing before a small studio audience.
By and large, the players would certainly prefer to play before many, many people. However, the players are bottom line oriented, and we've seen that in this day and age of free agency. So if it meant that by playing in front of a cable audience of 2 or 3 million people as opposed to playing before 20,000 was going to put more bread on their table, I think the players would accept the bigger paycheck and swallow whatever disappointment they had at the size of the live gate.
Owners of the teams and cable services admit that fans may not be pleased with having to pay for sports programming. Their hope is that the average fan will stop complaining long enough to mail in the monthly check.
Maybe there will be some of those people who will not be able to afford that $10 to $12. There are some of those people who cannot afford to buy a ticket to a baseball game. There are people who cannot afford to buy a television set. I don't know that, it's something that I'm sure people are aware of, are concerned about. But quite frankly, it's a business proposition, and it's something that you have to maintain the status of a team. You have to maintain the good financial resources of a team.
Many people who watch sports on TV believe there's nothing they can do.
Boy, it was nice a few years back when we had it all for nothing. And now it's all being split up and channeled out, and we're going to have to pay for it all. It's inevitable. I guess we just have to do it.
I don't mind paying as long as I can pay per event, and they have quality sporting events. I wouldn't want to pay a monthly bill. I have to pay regardless of whether you're watching something or not.
But one fan believes people should strike back. Former NFL Players representative Ed Garvey says when a team owner controls the cable sports channel, that's a game of monopoly. Garvey predicts the real pinch for dollars will be put on viewers in 4 years. That's when the NFL contracts with the TV networks expire. Garvey says football will go on cable. That could mean some hefty monthly charges for armchair quarterbacks.
Well, the NFL sees billions of dollars in cable television down the road. And the battle that is taking place now between Pete Rozelle and Al Davis is really over the share of the Los Angeles cable television market, not over the commissioner's concern for the fans of Oakland. And several years ago, when the league was negotiating with the networks, it threatened to set up its own television network for sports. And I think that's their hope 4 years from now, that they could have their own television system sharing with baseball, basketball, and hockey, and charge the viewer for every program that the viewer watches.
Garvey says the 1982 players' strike was based on cable revenue projections. The players want a cut of the cable profits for each team. Garvey claims every NFL club will pull in about $40 million a year from cable. Garvey suggests that fans express their concern to their congressmen. The station manager back at Channel 17 in Philadelphia says it could have an impact.
Washington, D.C. for years had a baseball team and had a football team. When they lost baseball, certain members in Congress were very upset. Now they only had football to watch. They could not watch football on television because home telecasts were blacked out. And it was at the behest of Congress that the blackout rule that currently exists in television was lifted. My point is that if enough pressure is brought to bear, things change in this country.
If you have story ideas or comments, send them to the New Tech Times, 821 University Avenue, Madison, Wisconsin, 53706.
Dr. Patrick Dixon is a professor of child and family studies at the University of Wisconsin, where he specializes in the microcomputers and young children. Hi, Pat. Welcome back to the New Tech Times.
Pleased to be here again.
What I would like to discuss with you this time is just what the family ought to do about the microcomputer in almost that vague a sense. I think that there are many parents who have a lot of anxiety. They want to do the right thing for their kids. They just don't really know what that is. What would you advise them? Someone who doesn't yet have a computer at home but's thinking about whether to do it. Is it important?
Well, it can be important in those homes where the parents are comfortable with it, are willing to spend time helping their child use it, and are willing to make the commitment of time in making decisions about software. I don't think a parent who is terribly anxious about it should rush out and buy one just out of guilt.
What's the process you should go through? Assume you do have some interest, but you don't have one, and you think your kid might use it to advantage. What steps should you go through? How do you go about this? Can be a major decision.
It is a major decision. It's a major decision initially whether to buy and then which machine to buy. I think parents ought to make that decision on hardware, looking at what other people they know have bought, what the school system is using in their community, as well as talking to salesmen.
Are there books you can read, courses you can take that you would recommend, magazines?
The most rapidly growing section of the publishing business right now is books on how to use computers, how to buy computers. There are lots of books. There are many magazines that lay out reports. Consumer Reports recently had a detailed analysis of many of the machines for home use.
Some people have expressed concern that there's a sort of latent sexism in computers, that some parents will buy a computer for their boys but not for their girls. Do you think that's a problem?
I think it's a very serious problem. I do believe that skills with computers hold the key to many of the important influential jobs in the future. There's a lot of evidence that parents, for example, do not tend to spend as much for their boys, for their girls as for boys. Studies showed that boys and girls go to computer camps at roughly the same level at the most introductory level, but the more advanced, the more expensive computer camps, it becomes predominantly boys.
Pat, we hear about the information poor, the information rich in our society. What you and I are talking about is fine for a family that is weighing whether to spend money on a vacation or another car or something of that sort and decides they want to get a computer instead. But what about those who really don't have the discretionary income to be buying any kind of a computer? Are they to be left out forever in our society?
I worry about the current computer revolution widening the gap between the educational haves and have-nots. And as far as I can see right now, the only hope for poor kids is in the public schools. And that's why it's so urgent that we get microcomputers into public schools, because for poor kids, that is going to be their one way of having access.
Thank you, Pat. Children aren't the only ones who are affected by computers and the rest of this new technology. It's entered the lives of each one of us in one way or another, even if it's just something to fear. Now, women are our nation's largest minority group. The only minority group, in fact, that constitutes a majority of the population. The only minority group that's still paid less than 2/3 the wages of men for the same work. And computers are creating a special set of considerations for women, including some pluses that may surprise you. Here's this week's guest commentator, Ms. Magazine columnist Lindsay Van Gelder.
Well, I think, first of all, we have to say that probably a lot of people, male and female, are pretty terrified of these machines. I read one survey that showed that something like 5% of all male executives, when confronted with an Apple computer on a desktop, would break out into a cold sweat and literally want to throw up. I think the difference between men and women is that men are really socialized to be macho. There's a lot of negative sides to that, but in this instance, I think men maybe more think, gee, this is something I really have to learn about, and so they kind of grit their teeth and do it. One of the things that's kind of interesting is that even though women start at a disadvantage in terms of being comfortable with computers, executives don't type, and women do. And I kind of find this poetic. justice that once you get a woman in front of a computer, she will often really jump ahead of a man who is sitting at the next console because, you know, she's not scared of typing. I like the idea that computers are kind of an extension of your brain. When you're sitting at your computer as a female, a lot of the things that would be kind of against you in the general business world or the general world in terms of, you know, strength or, you know, having a deep, booming, aggressive voice or whatever, are gone when you're sitting in front of the computer. And the idea of people in the future all kind of communicating, doing business that way as lines of type on a screen is pretty interesting to think about.
Lindsay Van Gelder's right. There can be a kind of democratization from computer communications. It's similar to what those of us who are amateur radio operators have when we transmit in Morse code, because age and sex and race, religion, nationality, all seem to vanish in those little dots and dashes, or in the bits and bytes of a computer. But she's also right about the frustration. You know, this week, a new database program on my home computer devoured everyone on my mailing list whose last name began with a letter after K. I'm sorry, Mary Joan Kaminsky, wherever you are. The New Tech Times is a long way from utopia. But it's our times, and I hope you'll be back here to share them with me again next week.
The New Tech Times has been brought to you through a grant from Wausau Insurance Companies. Times change. Wausau works. For discount information and your free copy of How to Buy a Home Computer, send $1 to The New Tech Times, 821 University Avenue, Madison, Wisconsin, 53706.